The cafe's ambient lighting cast a warm glow on my phone screen as it buzzed relentlessly. Leo, incoming call, flashed across the display for the third time in 5 minutes. I didn't answer. Instead, I scrolled through Instagram, stopping at his latest post, a blurry selfie with Isabella captioned, "Seeking inspiration." My lips curved into a cold smile as I thought, today, you'll watch that inspiration turn to ash. 4 years ago, I believed Leo Thorne was my salvation. We met at a gallery opening downtown, where his confident stride and passionate discourse about abstract expressionism drew me in like a moth to flame. He was everything I wasn't: spontaneous, artistic, unafraid to chase dreams. I was the practical one, the stable one, the one who paid bills on time and kept color-coded spreadsheets for everything. When he looked at me that first night, with those piercing blue eyes and that crooked smile, I felt like I was finally interesting enough to deserve someone extraordinary. Our early days were intoxicating. Leo would show up at my office with impromptu picnic lunches, whisk me away for midnight drives to watch sunrise from some hidden overlook he'd discovered. He painted word pictures of our future, a loft studio where he'd create masterpieces while I managed the business side, gallery exhibitions with my name listed as his muse and partner. I fell hard and fast, convinced I'd found my person. The first crack appeared 6 months in. Leo's freelance photography gigs weren't covering his share of expenses. "Art doesn't pay the bills immediately," he'd say, running his fingers through his deliberately tousled hair. "But real love means supporting each other's dreams, right? You believe in me, don't you?" So I started covering his rent when shoots fell through, then his car payment when a client delayed payment, then groceries, utilities, his student loan minimums. Each time, he'd wrap his arms around me and whisper about how this was temporary, how he'd pay me back with interest once his career took off. By year 2, I was essentially financing Leo's entire lifestyle while working overtime at my marketing firm to make ends meet. My savings account, once healthy from years of careful budgeting, dwindled to double digits. Meanwhile, Leo's Instagram feed showcased expensive coffee dates, new camera equipment, and nights out with his artist friends. When I gently suggested he might consider a part-time job for stability, his face would darken. "You don't understand the creative process, Anya. Mundane work kills inspiration. Would you rather I compromised my vision for minimum wage?" The arguments became a pattern. I'd raise concerns about money. He'd twist it into questions about my faith in our relationship. "If you really loved me," became his favorite phrase. If I really loved him, I'd understand why he couldn't work retail. If I really loved him, I wouldn't stress him with financial anxiety. If I really loved him, I'd see this as an investment in our shared future. I started second-guessing every concern, wondering if I was being unsupportive, selfish, small-minded. Chloe, my college roommate and closest friend, saw through Leo's manipulation immediately. During our monthly brunches, she'd listen to my latest excuse for his behavior with growing frustration. "Anya, healthy relationships don't require one person to sacrifice everything, while the other contributes nothing but promises," she'd say, her lawyer instincts sharp as ever. But I was too deep in to listen. I'd defend Leo passionately, explaining how difficult the creative industry was, how traditional career paths didn't apply to artists, how love meant supporting each other through struggles. Year 3 brought Isabella. She started as vague comments on Leo's social media posts, inside jokes I wasn't part of, mysterious phone calls he'd take in another room. When I asked about her, Leo would laugh it off. "She's just an old friend from art school. You're being paranoid, babe. It's not attractive when you're jealous." I swallowed my concerns, ashamed of what he called my insecurity. The late-night calls became routine. Leo would slip out of bed at 2 a.m., whispering into his phone in the hallway. I'd lie awake, heart pounding, trying to convince myself it was work-related. Art galleries kept odd hours, didn't they? Inspiration struck at strange times. I became an expert at rationalizing the irrational. Last winter, everything escalated. Leo's photography business was struggling more than ever, but instead of adapting, he seemed to retreat further into his artistic persona. He'd disappear for days, claiming he needed creative solitude to work on his portfolio. I discovered charges on our shared credit card from restaurants across town, bars I'd never heard of, ride shares, to addresses that weren't studios or galleries. When confronted, he'd accuse me of being controlling, of trying to stifle his creative freedom. "Trust is the foundation of any relationship," he'd say, making me feel guilty for even questioning him. "If you can't trust me, then maybe you're not ready for a real partnership." The breaking point came on a Sunday morning in March. I'd spent the weekend alone again, while Leo attended what he called a creative retreat with fellow photographers. I was making pancakes, trying to salvage some normalcy in our increasingly chaotic relationship, when he walked in looking refreshed and energized in a way I hadn't seen in months. He sat down at our small kitchen table, poured himself coffee from the pot I'd prepared, and said with casual indifference, "If you really love me, you'll let me have one last weekend with Isabella. Just to resolve our past, so I can be completely yours." The spatula slipped from my hand, clattering against the stove. I turned to face him, certain I'd misheard. What did you just say? Leo took a slow sip of coffee, meeting my gaze steadily. Isabella and I have unfinished business. One weekend to get closure on what we had before I commit fully to us. It's actually romantic if you think about it, choosing you after exploring every option. My knees went weak. 4 years of gaslighting, financial manipulation, and emotional neglect crystallized in that single moment. You're asking for permission to cheat on me. It's not cheating if I'm honest about it, he replied with infuriating calm. This is about us, Anya. About clearing the air so we can move forward without baggage. I thought you'd appreciate the transparency. I stared at him. This man I'd sacrificed everything for, asking me to bless his betrayal with the same casual tone he'd used to request the television remote. The pancakes burned on the stove as years of suppressed anger erupted in my chest. Get out, I whispered. Don't be dramatic, Leo said, rolling his eyes. I'm trying to be mature about this. Get out, I screamed, grabbing the coffee mug from his hands and hurling it against the wall. The ceramic shattered, brown liquid streaming down the white paint like tears. Leo stood up slowly, that familiar condescending smile playing on his lips. When you're ready to have an adult conversation about this, let me know. I'll be at Isabella's this weekend anyway. He walked out without another word, leaving me standing in our kitchen surrounded by broken porcelain and the smell of burning batter. I sank to the floor, sobbing until my chest ached, mourning not just our relationship but the person I'd become. Weak, dependent, invisible. After an hour of tears, something shifted inside me. The grief transformed into white-hot rage, then calcified into cold determination. I called in sick to work, drove to Chloe's apartment, and laid out the entire story. Every financial sacrifice, every manipulative conversation, every red flag I'd ignored. Chloe listened without interruption, her expression growing darker with each revelation. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she looked me straight in the eye and said, "We're going to destroy him." That week, while Leo enjoyed his closure weekend with Isabella, Chloe and I orchestrated the most satisfying revenge I've ever witnessed. We started with the practical. I removed my name from our joint accounts after transferring my contributions to a new account Leo couldn't access. I called the apartment complex and terminated our lease early, paying the fee without hesitation. I contacted utility companies, internet providers, and anyone else whose services I'd been financing. The car was trickier. Although I'd been making payments on Leo's Honda for 2 years, his name was on the title. Chloe's legal expertise came in handy here. We discovered a loophole. I could report the car as abandoned on private property since he'd left it in our apartment complex while staying elsewhere. After 30 days, I could legally dispose of it. I donated it to a women's shelter, ensuring it would help someone who actually deserved assistance. Meanwhile, I gathered evidence. Screenshots of our Venmo history showing my constant payments to him. Bank statements proving I'd covered our shared expenses. Text messages where he'd promised to pay me back soon and then asked for more money days later. Most damning of all, I recovered deleted social media conversations between Leo and Isabella, planning their weekend together while he lived off my financial support. But the masterstroke was the recording device. Leo had left his old iPhone behind the one he used for music and claimed was broken. I'd had it repaired months ago as a surprise, but never gave it to him after one of our arguments. Now, I reactivated it and left it in his usual spot on the coffee table. When he returned from his weekend with Isabella, he'd talk to himself while getting ready, practicing his apologies and justifications. The phone captured everything, his laughter about how easy I was to manipulate, his crude comments about my appearance, his detailed plans to ask me for money to fund more trips with Isabella. Sunday night, Leo returned to find our apartment completely empty. No furniture, no utilities, no internet, no Anya. He called me 37 times that first night. I know because I counted each missed call while sipping wine with Chloe, watching his increasingly desperate voicemails. Anya, what the hell? Where's all our stuff? The power's out. Babe, I know you're upset, but this is crazy. Call me back. This is really immature. We need to talk like adults. Fine. You want to play games? I'll stay at Isabella's until you come to your senses. He never once apologized, never acknowledged what he'd done wrong. Even facing homelessness, his primary concern was inconvenience, not accountability. The social media campaign was surgical in its precision. I didn't post anything myself that would have seemed bitter and desperate. Instead, I shared Leo's own words. The screenshots of him asking for one last weekend with his ex, posted to a group chat with our mutual friends. His recorded confessions about manipulating me financially, sent to the photography groups where he sought work. His Instagram posts from the weekend with Isabella, paired with evidence of my Venmo payments funding his lifestyle. I didn't need to say anything. The facts spoke for themselves. The response was swift and devastating. Fellow photographers began distancing themselves from Leo publicly. Gallery owners who'd been considering his work suddenly went silent. His Instagram comments filled with shocked reactions from friends who'd had no idea how he'd been treating me. One particularly memorable comment came from Sarah, a mutual friend. I always wondered how Leo afforded his lifestyle on such sporadic income. Now I know Anya was essentially his sugar mama while he cheated on her. Disgusting. Isabella disappeared from his social media within 48 hours. Apparently, a broke, homeless artist wasn't as appealing as the financially stable creative she'd thought she was stealing. 2 weeks later, I moved into a gorgeous one-bedroom apartment in Midtown, twice as nice as anything I could have afforded while supporting Leo. I decorated it exactly how I wanted. Clean lines, bold colors, not a single piece of artistic clutter in sight. For the first time in years, I came home to peace. My work performance skyrocketed without the constant stress of Leo's financial demands. I received a promotion and significant raise within 3 months, recognition that had been delayed while I'd been too exhausted and distracted to excel. Chloe and I started taking weekend trips to wine country, something I'd never been able to afford while funding Leo's artistic dreams. I joined a gym, started reading again, took a photography class ironically enough, and discovered I was actually quite good at it. Without Leo's constant criticism disguised as constructive feedback, I began to remember who I was before I dimmed myself to make him feel brighter. The confrontation I'd been dreading came at Jessica's wedding 6 months later. Leo was there, looking thin and tired, his usual confidence replaced by nervous energy. He'd clearly heard about my promotion, my new apartment, my flourishing social life. When he approached me at the bar, I felt nothing but mild curiosity about what he'd say. "Anya," he began, attempting his old charming smile. "You look incredible." "Thank you," I replied coolly, not returning the compliment. "Listen, I know things ended badly between us. I've had time to think, and I realize I made some mistakes. Maybe we could grab coffee sometime, talk things through?" I studied his face, searching for any sign of genuine remorse or self-awareness. Instead, I saw the same manipulative calculation I'd grown to recognize so well. "What specifically do you think you did wrong, Leo?" He shifted uncomfortably. "I probably should have been more communicative about the Isabella situation. And maybe I relied on you too much financially. But relationships are partnerships, right? We both made mistakes." Even now, facing the wreckage of his reputation and career, he couldn't take full responsibility. "What mistakes did I make exactly?" "Well, you were pretty controlling toward the end, and the way you left without talking things through was really hurtful. Mature couples work through problems together." I laughed, surprising both of us. "Leo, I spent 4 years working through problems while you created new ones. I communicated my concerns constantly while you dismissed them as paranoia or unsupportiveness. You asked for permission to cheat on me, then acted surprised when I refused to enable that too." His face flushed. "I never cheated. I was honest about wanting closure with Isabella. Honesty doesn't make betrayal acceptable. Being upfront about your intention to hurt someone doesn't make you noble." I reached into my purse and pulled out a small USB drive, placing it on the bar between us. "This is my closure gift to you. Your recorded thoughts from when you returned to our empty apartment. You might find it illuminating." Leo's hand shook as he picked up the drive. He knew exactly what I meant. "I hope it serves as inspiration for your next relationship," I continued. "Assuming anyone else is willing to risk dating you after your reputation in the art community." I turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Leo?" The mature response to being abandoned would have been self-reflection, not 37 voicemails blaming me for refusing to fund your affair. As I walked away, I felt a lightness I hadn't experienced in years. The woman who'd sobbed on her kitchen floor 6 months ago was gone, replaced by someone who knew her worth and wouldn't accept less than she deserved. A year later, I'm thriving in ways I never imagined possible. My new apartment became a sanctuary, where friends gather for dinner parties I actually enjoy hosting. My promotion led to a leadership role I love, working with brands to tell authentic stories about resilience and empowerment. I'm saving money again, this time for a solo trip to Italy I've dreamed about since college. Most surprisingly, I'm dating again. Marcus is an environmental lawyer I met through Chloe, and he's everything Leo wasn't: financially responsible, emotionally available, genuinely interested in my thoughts and dreams. When I told him about Leo, he was appalled, not intrigued. "I can't imagine asking someone I love to fund my life while giving nothing back," he said. "That's not love, that's exploitation." The difference is revelatory. Marcus pays for dates, remembers details about my work, celebrates my successes without trying to make them about him. When I mentioned wanting to learn Spanish, he signed us up for classes together instead of explaining why it was impractical. He sees my strength as attractive, not threatening. I ran into Leo one last time at a coffee shop downtown. He was alone, typing on an old laptop, looking every bit the struggling artist he'd always claimed to be. When he saw me, he started to stand, but I shook my head slightly. There was nothing left to say. Through the window, I watched him return to his laptop, shoulders slumped in defeat. I felt a moment of pity, not for the man who'd manipulated and betrayed me, but for someone so limited in his capacity for growth. Then I thought about my evening plans. dinner with Marcus at that new restaurant we'd been wanting to try, followed by a movie neither of us had to pretend to enjoy for the other's sake. Walking to my car, I realized Leo had been right about one thing. He had been my liberation. Not in the way he'd intended, but in the most important way possible. His betrayal had shattered the cage I'd built around myself, the prison of making myself smaller to accommodate someone else's ego. In trying to break me, he'd accidentally set me free. Now I know what real love looks like. It multiplies your strength instead of draining it, celebrates your success instead of competing with it, and asks you to be more yourself, not less. I learned to love myself fiercely, to protect my peace jealously, and to never again mistake someone's need for my resources as proof of my value. The girl who would have begged Leo to stay is gone. In her place stands a woman who knows that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away, and that the most powerful response to someone's manipulation is your own flourishing. I don't need anyone to complete me anymore. I'm already whole.